started. Thank you for being here. Before I tell you a little bit about myself and get into some IBA and things like that, I just want to set some community agreements for our conversation today. We ask that folks speak from their experience, right, using I statements when you have questions or inquiries. We ask that you honor complexity, right? There's a lot of nuance, right? There's a lot of different approaches and perspectives throughout the conversation and the dialogue. We ask that you assume good intentions, right, while taking responsibility for the impact. We also ask that you protect confidentiality, protect it, and also make room for multiple truths, right? This goes back to nuance. I also want to invite people to be a little curious, right, about the conversations that we're having with each other. And I wanted to get that kicked off before we went any further. Welcome to ESOC's Reimagining Spirituality series. This is part 2 of the series this year, and we are focusing on Black birth workers, ancestors, and the politics of life. I have the esteemed pleasure to be in conversation with two sister friends, two EA friends, right, who do really important work at the intersection of spirituality and community. And we are going to get into a beautiful dialogue and hopefully hear from you as well. Before we go any further, as a priest in the Ifa and Orisha tradition and a practitioner of African traditions, we know that anything we do, we must do what first? Give homage, right? Give reverence. So if you're new to African traditions and you're new to anything African in terms of spirituality, welcome. You'll be hearing us say something like Iba, right? So wherever you are, you don't have to unmute. When I am giving homage and doing it with a Yoruba tongue, a Caribbean flair, and my understanding and interpretation of English, you could simply say Ibashe, right? As I give Iba. So ela geje geje babala o itala she ela geje geje omio ota o eri o agba urmole o re ye o shun iba to olo domare creative heaven, iba to olo domare creative earth, iba to onile mother earth, iba to the iame o saranga, iba to oshun shingesi olo ayun, iba to eshu la lu ogirioko, iba to rumila lady ipi, iba to egbe oju oni watio, iba to egungun aun kenken, iba to mbompo awon iramole and all the Orisha. Iba Baba, Iba Yeye, Iba Luo, Iba Ojubona, Iba Yanifa, Iba to my mother Paulette McNally, Iba to my father Trevor Treasure, Iba to Okomi, Ifaloa Joshe Eshibi Yadeola, Iba to Oluomi Awabola Ifayemi, Iba to Yami Oshunkemi Bogumbe, Iba to Yanifa Ifatoyin Bogumbe, Iba to Bompoanwo members of the clergy of Ijoy Fagunda Masa, Iba to Ia Larisha and Baba Larisha with Iwadede, Iba to Arisha de devotees with what a good character. Iba to my mates on earth and in of heaven with good character. Iba to my junior ones. Iba to my senior ones. Iba to my Ori. Iba to the Oris of these priests that are here. Iba to their temple as well. Iba to all the Oris of the people that are present in hearing this. Iba to everyone's ancestors of good character and good light who will listen to this on YouTube in the future. Iba to Risha devotees with what a good character. Iba to ATR practitioners with what a good character. Iba to all the activists and organizers and birth workers and doulas and artists that have also been doing good work. Unless we do it without homage, our undertaking shall never be fruitless. Ashe, 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 wow. So welcome if you're just joining us. If you're hearing this live or on a recording somewhere on YouTube, welcome to you as well. We're going to get into a beautiful conversation. My name is Iafabumi, also known as Trinice. If you know me from way back when. You're probably calling me Trinice. You're probably calling me Ia, TJ, or whatever feels good for you. I'm going to be sharing with you a little bit about ESOC, but we want to talk about some access needs. Right? So throughout the session, please attend to your bio needs, okay? Stretch when you need to. You're going to see us doing it. Go to the bathroom when you need to. Eat a snack when you need to. Drink your water when you need to. Answer your text messages when you need to. Your boo call you. Answer the call if you want to, right? Anything that you need, right, to attend to your needs, please do that. Attending to your needs are really important, not only for you to be present, but in order for you to do what you need to do, yeah? If you speak, please speak directly into the camera so that everyone can hear you. If you turn your head, right, like sideways, or you're very far away, folks who also are experiencing hearing loss might have a harder time understanding you. So please try to look straight and directly in the camera and speak as loudly as possible. And then we also are inviting you to use captions. There's a feature with Zoom that allows you to turn the captions on. This is really important because you're talking to 3 Caribbean women. So we all speak a little bit of different things. We got different dialects, right? So if you're like, what's that word? What are they trying to say? We also might have some Yoruba infusion, or maybe even some medical terminology. You don't know. These folks are really brilliant on this panel. If you want to see, right, like what they're saying to catch it or ask a question, I suggest the captions, right, can really support you, right, in your learning and your understanding. And the last one is to use the Zoom feature, right, to make any images on the slides larger. We'll have a couple of slides in the beginning of the conversation, but after that, it's kind of just us 3, right, in conversation with all of you. So please meet your access needs as well, and we hope that this slide gives you some support. So a little bit about ESOC. We were initially founded to provide accessible political education to DMV college students and also faculty and staff in 2020. This initiative was born following the murders of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and Oluwatoyin. I have to slow down because a lot of Nolan Wells is also following me in this moment. And we think it's really interesting that 6 years later, right, that we're having a similar conversation with a different tone. This organization started along with the defund police movement, right, in the midst of the COVID pandemic, right, in the midst of police brutality happening in our communities. But since then, we've made a shift, right? We were working with faculty members, we were working with students who were organizing, and, folks were really taking things to the streets, but didn't have the political education they needed. So that is how we got started as an organization. So far, we've provided campus support to close to 30 DMV institutions across DC, Maryland, and Virginia, and over 120 students, faculty, staff, and community members. The last 6 years have been teaching us a lot, right, about how we reimagine safety, how we reimagine hope, and also how we reimagine spirituality. So a little bit about our work. We foster critical consciousness and provide wellness tools for DMV college students, like I shared a little bit more about earlier. What you really need to understand about ESOC as we're talking about this work is we do the lens we're using to do the work is through Black feminisms, care ethics, which is central to our work, and also transformative justice. These particular frameworks equip participants with the knowledge, the skills, and the tools to prioritize their wellness while continuing to engage them politically in activism. And we made this really big shift right in 2023. We talked a little bit more about political education. We ran some alumni cohorts. We did a lot of Black feminist organizing. And we realized that in order to do well, you got to be well, right? So we made a shift in 2023 to introduce a more holistic and creative approach to social justice. And this to reimagine the futures we see fit for Black and brown people in terms of collective wellness and liberation, right? So ensuring that spirit is prioritized, that we're also taking action, right? Where we're turning our values into practice, practicing mindfulness, studying and unlearning internalized oppressions, the body, right? The body is often the first site of violence when we're talking about Black and brown people and how we experience the world. So how do we provide nourishment for it, right? How do we prioritize rest and somatic healing to understand what's happening intrinsically and externally? And the last one being culture, where we focus a lot on preserving documentation and archives in our work as cultural and memory workers. So from 2020 to 2023, we've made a lot of transitions, and now here we are in 2026, where we've started to incorporate more of a spirituality ethos, right, in our work. So we always talked about self-care as a collective, but now more than ever, we're offering up spirituality as a way to think about fortification of ourselves, right, the community, and also the world. Our work, though, right, is still similar to past iterations, but we're now going to have more of a spiritual ideology, right, in terms of our practices that are woven into all our offerings. Hence tonight's conversation. So in our practice, we refuse the collapse of spirituality into individualism and into our methods. We refuse all systems of domination that harm Black peoples. Spirituality is where the past, the present, the future are one. right? So you return to being the now and in the future all at once, to ways of being and knowing that we cannot erase. So this is the approach of the conversation. And you'll notice as we host more events, there will be more Afro-diasporic conversations, but there will be more Judaic conversations. There may be more Hebrew conversations. We're going to have all kinds of conversations because spirituality is not and does not sit within a box. Right, so we're coming to you in this conversation tonight as Iseshe practitioners with Caribbean backgrounds, right? And that is how we're also orienting ourselves in terms of our spiritual practice. So why this conversation, right? Why are we talking about Black birth workers? Why is that even in the same line, right, as death? Because that thin line is what we're going to talk about tonight, right? So Black communities continue to face profound maternal health inequities, even as they carry rich traditions of birth work, ancestral care, collective healing that have sustained generations. This conversation invites us to reclaim birth more than a medical event. Right? It's sacred, it's cultural, and a political practice rooted in African and Caribbean traditions. By centering doulas, spiritual leaders, and ancestral wisdom, we explore how caring for Black life is both an act of remembrance and a pathway towards collective liberation. Right? So this is what's grounding us in this conversation tonight. And I want to focus a little bit on birth and ancestry as sacred communities. You know, it's also Black Maternal Mental Health Week, right? So this conversation is not happening in a vacuum, right? Where we're starting to really have conversations in our community that not only center birth workers, but also center birthing people's experiences, right? Postpartum. We're also in a very heavy week, I would say, as it relates to Black mamas experiencing deep grief and profound loss, right? And that loss is not just any old loss, that their babies, their children are passing away, but their babies are being taken, right? Their babies are being stolen. Their lives are being commodified. So when we talk about that dash, right, between birth and death, right, this is why we have these two people here to talk with us tonight about birth and ancestry as sacred continuums, right? Across many African and African diasporic traditions, birth is not understood as the beginning of life, nor death as the end of life. The living, the ancestors, and those yet to be born exist in an ongoing relationship of reciprocity and responsibility. Those who accompany birth and those who tend to the ancestors both serve as guardians of life's sacred transitions, ensuring that memory, lineage, and community endure across generations. So I just want us to sit for a minute with that, recognizing that dash, that luckily for us, we're living in that dash, we're present here today, is a very sacred continuum that particular people are gifted, specialized, and tasked, right, with being guardians of bringing in, right, the life, and also tending to the life afterwards so that cycle can continue. And there are many names for this across our traditions, and I would argue some may not even know that names existed, but they have done that work. Many of us come from families of folks that have been tending to the dead, right, helping people die, right? Bringing children into the world, caring for birthing people and mothers specifically when they experience loss, whether that is miscarriage or a sleeping angel, or even caring for a mother after her child is taken. This continuum is sacred. And something that a good friend of mine, Oshunfu Milola, you might know her as Jujube. You know, she talked a little bit on her podcast about Black people dying different. And I would argue that she's right. Right? Because all of our traditions point us back into this sacred tree of life. Right? This continuum, that big dash. And, you know, to add a little bit of layer, right, in the conversation, you know, we're coming to you from this perspective as Isheshe practitioners, as traditionalists, right, that practice a Yoruba tradition that can trace some of our ancestral roots to Yoruba people, right, of southwestern Nigeria. And there are many other tribal affiliations that we have, right? But we steep ourselves in this practice, right? Because a lot of our destiny in this iteration of our life is related to them. So when I'm talking about from Orun to Aye, from heaven to earth, right? In Yoruba thought, life unfolds in relationship, right? The spiritual realm that we might know as heaven. And Aye, the visible world, right? The earth that we're walking on. Birth marks a sacred crossing into community, while ancestors continue to guide and accompany the living. Those who are welcoming new life and those who tend to ancestral memory are both helping sustain this relationship across generations. So I just want to ground us in how we are approaching the conversation and why we feel like the conversation is even necessary. You know, some folks may say, well, why are we having a conversation about death if we're talking about birth? And I would say, baby, if you know, you know. If you know, you know. And it's only the mamas and the birthing people that know. Not only what the mind does, what the body does, what the heart does, what the spirit does, and what the ancestors do the minute that sperm hits an egg, irregardless of how it went, right? I'm less concerned with gender and sexual orientation. All my people are here, and we all reproduce in our own ways that we see fit for our bodies. But when a person with a womb, right, enters that phase of having the responsibility to bring another life into the world, something is also happening in the ancestral realm. So this conversation about birth and death, we have to start normalizing these conversations and seeing Black birth work and ancestral tending, right, as one in some ways and also very different. So I welcome you all to this conversation, and I want to share a little bit about these amazing people I get to call friend. So Dr. Natalia Mills, a native of Trinidad and Tobago, serves as Chief Erelu Awo of Iworo, Oka, Okoko, Nigeria. And she's also serving as the Secretary General of the ICIR USA, International Council for Ifa Religion. And folks are like, what does that mean? She's an artist philosopher, a curator, a fashion historian, and 2017 David Driscoll Fellow, who holds a PhD in art theory and philosophy. Her interdisciplinary scholarship explores Caribbean carnival, Yoruba ontology, dress, identity, and Black body politics through her original framework, Carnivalizing Philosophy. Through this work, she examines the intersections of culture, spirituality, aesthetics, and embodiment, highlighting the ways performance and visual expression shape social and philosophical understandings. Her work bridges academic inquiry with lived cultural practices across transnational Black communities and traditions globally. Dr. Mills, or Chief Erelu Awo, is also the founder and executive director of IOIA Incorporated and serves as a spiritual head of Ile Ijosin Ifa Otito Ile Aye Temple in New York City, where she advances artistic, educational, and spiritual initiatives within local and global communities. Welcome to Dr. Mills. Really excited to be in conversation with you in this way. Something she didn't put, but it's actually her most important job, is that she's a mama. And that's her first and most important job if you ask her.
Absolutely.
All right, let's get into Iya Eshukemi. So Iya Eshukemi Ifawumi Leslie Ann Okori is an Ifa and Eshu priestess. She's also a full spectrum birth worker, a multidisciplinary artist, and community advocate dedicated to advancing the health, healing, and liberation of all Black communities. As the founder of By the Elemental LLC, look up her website because it is lit, she integrates African Indigenous spirituality, reproductive justice, and cultural education to support individuals and families across the reproductive spectrum. Her work spans birth and postpartum care, childbirth education, wellness programming, and community organizing as well. A vocalist, drummer, dancer, writer, and creative producer, Iya Eshukemi uses art as a tool for storytelling, healing, and also social change. Through her leadership, advocacy, and spiritual services, she creates transformative spaces where culture, wellness, and collective empowerment intersect. Thank you for being here with us. One thing she also didn't say, because she's like, goes without saying, is that she is a mama, right? And I would argue that that's also her first lens, right, in terms of how she's approaching this conversation as well. So without further ado, we are going to get into the conversation. Give us like 20 seconds to reorient ourselves, and we're going to jump in. Special greetings to all of y'all that are here. Now I can actually see people, so I'm happy about that. And thanks for being in community with us. You know what I'm saying, on a Wednesday, to have a very important conversation. And we're glad you're with us, and we hope you stay with us, and that we can engage you and support you in your work too. All right, so the first question. Across many African and Caribbean traditions, birth is understood as more than a biological event. It is a sacred crossing into community, lineage, and responsibility. Those who accompany birth and those who tend to the ancestors stand at different thresholds, right, of the same continuum of care. Can you both tell us a little bit about yourselves and what first called you to this work?
I guess I'll go first. A little bit about myself. I mean, I can't do any better than the introduction that you gave, truly. It was fabulous. Um, but I am also a Vincentian woman, from the Caribbean lens. Currently live in Jersey City, but I'm also from Brooklyn, New York, so keep that in mind always. Um, what drove me to this work? I don't think I had a choice. I don't think it was ever a choice. From the time I was little, children fascinated me, pregnant bellies fascinated me. And I think after becoming a mother, I realized that this is what I need to do. I'd always had an interest, but I stayed away because for me personally, I believed that it was hard to understand birth work without actually going through it myself. So once I took that leap of becoming a mother and having my own experience and all of these different kinds of things, and it kind of just like folded in on itself.
Thank you, Ia.
Okay, let me unmute myself. Hello, everyone. First, I would like to say thank you again for inviting me to have this conversation with you and Esther Kemi and Dr. D and everyone that's here. This is great. Again, like you introduced me pretty much, you did that. So I guess I'll get into how the calling was impossible to ignore. Um, I didn't know it was a calling at first, but then I was like, okay, that's what's happening. So it was certainly like the destiny portion, but it was also for me like a cultural, family, and ancestral because I grew up in a home where spirituality was a part of my life in different ways. So I had a Buddhist uncle, a spiritual Baptist grandmother. I went to Catholic school. Growing up in Trinidad is very diverse. So it just kind of like whatever you look like is what you practice because that's where your lineage was from. So uh multiculturalism and stuff wasn't a problem. And then growing up with a grandmother who was like a spiritual Baptist. Also like just seeing all those things, scared to death of it. But I guess it followed me from um Trinidad to the United States. I actually had a cousin that came over when I was pregnant with my son. And I remember seeing her doing things, and I'm like, what are you up to? And then I asked her, I said, so what you doing over there in the woods, girl? And she was like, kind of like what Granny was doing, but like the traditional version. And then I said, okay, well, tell me more. And at that time, I'm in Africana studies. I'm like really digging deep into this thing and having the idea of like, if I'm a Black person, I have to practice a Black religion and like, just kind of figuring out myself as well. And then I got a reading. It was Ifa, Ifa divination. And then, you know, here we are 11 years, 12 years later. But the calling, and then things just started to unfold. I always say I learned Ifa backwards. Like some people like, they're doing their research and they're doing certain things and then they kind of figure out they want to initiate and everything. For me, it was the other way around. My readings said like I had to initiate because so that I won't become an ancestor. So I kind of took care of that. And then when at the grove, they're like, oh, well, you're supposed to be doing X, Y, Z. Hold on now. I didn't come here for that. But yes, you're here for that. So then I have to initiate to ancestors and I have to do open a shrine and do this work. And I'm just like, a priestess of what? Like I like my carnival and drink my rum and have a good time. Like I don't know what this thing is you guys talking about. Um, and then, I just answered the call and I just kept going and Aoife just kind of miraculously put things in place and now here we are. It's unfolding every day. Yeah, it's been a journey.
Definitely hearing themes of emergence, like, right, with the both of you. And it brings me to my next question around, your both of your work. People might see it as a polarization, if you will, right? Birth and death. But we know, right, we're framing this as a continuum. So both of your work centers people at profound thresholds of transformation, either welcoming in and caring for, right, or ending, right, intending to. What has these sacred moments taught you about what it means to accompany someone through change and
Mm.
transition and transformation?
Um, so one of the lessons for me was one putting down fear, because you can't have fear in those spaces, and humility. Because, I'm not creating the transformation, right? I'm here to witness it, to assist, to even protect it,
Mm.
and just kind of like make space for it, right? So like whether you're becoming a new parent, you lost a parent, whether you recently lost a loved one, it could have been 10 years ago. I've done work for people that have, parents transitioned years ago, or, grieving, whatever it is, reconnecting. Like I don't have control over the journey. I'm just as figuring it out sometimes on in real time as the person that I'm assisting, so it's very like humbling in that way. Because we have to let spirit do what spirit does. I don't know what a divination will say. I don't know what this baby's coming with. I don't know what's happening to this person that's transitioning, right? So every experience is kind of like you have to surrender this because people are coming to you for you to help them. So you're the expert here, and I'm just like, yeah, but hold on. This is bigger
Mhm.
than me. Like I'm just doing what I can. I'm just the messenger here. So I think, and transformation is uncomfortable regardless of what it is. So just accompanying someone, I think for me it's humbling because and it builds courage though, because like once I get through a situation, it's like, okay, I can breathe, I got it. It helps me respect each spirit even more. Like every process makes me um hold on to Yerba and Ifa even more, because
Mhm.
I'm seeing how not like one, they're helping me through it, helping the person through it. We're getting through it. And I know I couldn't do it by myself. People are like, thank you, Chief, thank you. I'm like, no, 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 no. Ebola Damar, Ebola, like it's not me. I'm just I'm just the messenger, right? I'm just helping. So that's humility in itself. Like I'm not like, yeah, well, it's me, I'm doing it. And no, no, no. I'm just assisting you on this journey. So humility has definitely been a thing for me, and working through fear.
I think something that you said about control. I think in birth, that is one of the biggest things and biggest lessons that I've learned as someone who has continuously attended and assisted. A lot of the times we're told, make a birth plan, talk about how you want your birth to go, and da 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 da, XYZ. But then you get up in that room and you realize you don't got control over nothing. Okay? How that baby want to come is how that baby want to come. How the experience is going to go is how the experience is going to go. Once you realize that you have control over nothing in this situation, that is when you really let spirit take form, because you're doing a job. Like as a pregnant person, as somebody who is bringing somebody here, you are doing the job of making spirit into flesh, and you don't even know what's going on for real, right? Like when I talk to my mamas sometimes and they're like, oh, I didn't do nothing today. Really? You made fingers. You made toes. You made legs. You made a nose. You developed lungs. Like, you're not seeing that. Of course, you're not seeing that because it's going on internally. But once you realize that none of this is in your control, not a single bit of it, then you can really allow for things to move differently. And even as myself, someone who is witnessing it, right? Realizing that, yes, I can notice things. Yes, I can see things. Yes, I can help through things, but it is not my job to control the situation, right? It is my job to allow the pregnant person to ease through it, to remind them, hey, everything is going to be fine, but you're not in control. I think that was one of the biggest lessons for me in this entire process.
And that lesson in itself feels like there's an inherent relationship to like ancestors.
Absolutely.
Because anyone that has been through that process of birthing, whether we talking vaginal, cesarean, whatever we talking, the delivery itself, like I remember how I had all
Mhm.
these plans with this little girl.
Mhm.
We got the doula, we had the
Mhm.
midwife. I'm like, oh, we're gonna have water birth in the living room.
Right.
All
Babe's
that.
gonna bring Oshuna, Biemoja, like we're all gonna be around me. Like I'm talking about plans.
Yep.
Y'all know.
Romantic, romantic, just
Natalia
Mhm.
know. Like I'm like, and this is how it's gonna be.
Yep.
And preeclampsia came on month 7. That she showed
I
up
know. Yep.
and that baby came.
Absolutely.
And that was the define. I hear you like moving us into this other part of the conversation around like this is where the gap is bridged between you both.
Mm.
No, because how are you understanding the relationship between ancestors and babies
Absolutely.
entering this world? You know, like, and what is the community's responsibility to both? Because so many people, people were DMing me about this and was like, why you got a Gungun priestess talking about birth? You should come, shouldn't you? Because you obviously don't know,
Yep.
right?
and
Like
I don't.
there's a thin, you know what I mean? Like there's a thin line between what can happen to the birthing person, the mother, and that
Absolutely.
baby, right?
Absolutely.
So there's a relationship of community that we talk about privately that I really want to engage folks in this space around. What is the community's responsibility,
Mm.
right? Like to this process, and how do y'all both understand the relationship between it? Because y'all also work in a partnership,
Mm.
together. Like figuratively, people that may not know that, you're in the same ELA, you're doing work supporting people, but also just the flip side of that is like just clients and people. How do people start to connect the dots between birthing and death, right? And like there's a relationship between the babies and the ancestors in this really critical time.
It's so interesting that this is like the topic that we're discussing because I tell folks all the time that birth is the closest you could come to dying without dying.
Mhm.
Okay. In my own experience, very similar to you, plans, plans, plans. We was water birthing, doula, midwife, everybody was ready to pay down for the pool, everything. Preeclampsia said, hey girl, remember me? All that stress you've been holding for your entire life. Remember that? You forgot stress kills, right?
Mhm.
Oh, okay, no problem. And I remember the moment when it turned from a vaginal birth to a cesarean, and I remember a choice that I had to make to stay with my daughter. I remember actually actively making that choice and realizing that my spirit could have gone either way. And that's something that people don't realize happens in birth a lot of the times, most times, right? Because mamas go and get their babies and bring them with them. They're like, let's go. Come on, baby, you're coming and we're staying together, right? This is also something that is guided by so much ancestral zhuzh. I've seen situations where, people will be orphans. I've had clients who both on both sides, mother and father, everyone's gone, right? But in that room, when it's just you, your partner, your baby, and me as the witness and the help, right? You see and you feel their parents holding them and guiding them. And once they start listening to that, once they start like really tuning into that and you see the transition from them being a person to them realizing, oh no, it's me in spirit, it's me and my ancestors, it's me and my Ori, it's me and my child, it's me and this process. It's unlike anything. It's unlike anything you've ever seen.
Yeah. I had a owl that um when one night she had a really rough night, no one could stay with her and she was there by herself, and she remembered praying because her mom had passed when she was a small child. And she's like, I don't know how I made it through the night, but I remember somebody saying to me, go to sleep. She was just like, she heard the voice and she was like, and she knew that her mom was there watching the baby while she slept.
Mm,
She was just like, I felt her there, you know? So people, I don't think people realize how close it is. Like you mentioned, we're on the cusp of death during birth, right? You hear when we do dafa sometimes on babies, they're in between heaven and earth. So we got to
yeah.
do ebo so the baby could stay. You know, we
Hmm.
have to do sacrifice in certain things so that mother and baby stay in this plane, right? It's
Hmm.
such a and I have a weird thing about hospitals because hospitals are like the beginning and the end, right? Like you're in this very strange crossroads in the hospital. You're
Hmm.
a couple feet away from, you know, where the ice is. So it's kind of it's
Hmm.
one of those, you know, very real things. And I don't know why people don't see the correlation. And I think what I am thankful for is in Yoruba spirituality, like how we do, how it makes it very prevalent, right? Or like you even hear things like that little girl, she from here before, or
Hmm.
you know, you might, you know, you look at this little person, you know, they've been here. So like you understand the ancestral connection, like you get it, right? Um, and also like, you know, my mother would always say, this child, every child come with something, right? So birthing is not the beginning of something. It's just another phase of a continuum of an older journey, right? Even if you're not into spirituality, you understand science. I had a friend in grad school and he was a scientist. Like, what is your religion? He was like, I don't have one. He's like, but I believe in science because he's like, energy doesn't die. So he's like, I
Hmm.
believe in ancestry because your energy goes somewhere. Like it doesn't go away. So, you know, and ancestors are like the foundation of living, right? So they send back, you know, they send a person down to do this work again. It's like a very cyclical. It's just a continuum, right? And coming from a person from a mom who is an ancestor person that came back and making a child that is an ancestor person that has returned is very interesting to see,
Absolutely.
you know, how what it looks like,
Hmm.
right? And how and then come and then you mentioned community. That's just, you know, its own other thing. Like you need it is so important. It's very sad. Like I even look at like Japanese women, like they get like a whole like they have like centers for moms to like be there for like 2 months in like this high-end hotel and they don't have to do
Hmm.
anything, you know, like but in America it's so sad because it's like these women are like having babies and then have no one and then have to go back to work and the baby's at the daycare and like all these things. There's no auntie, no cousin, no neighbor, you know, in the Caribbean, everyone live on this one plot of land. Auntie come in here, this one come in, everybody can kind of like help in this communal way, but we don't in the West, we don't have that in the same. We have to fight for that. Like, or we have to create community. We make our friends, like who, you know, because we might have family all over the world, especially if you're an immigrant. So, you know, we give thanks for community, but it's so necessary that we have it because the pregnancy is not something you want to do alone, delivery after, and death is not something you want to deal with alone. So community is important across the board for in all capacities, and they're all intertwined.
Yeah. It's almost impossible to do it alone.
Yeah.
You know, like if you must, whoa.
Well, good
But it,
mental health.
with right, with if you want to leave it mostly unscathed, mostly untraumatized, right? Because obviously birth is a trauma, death is a trauma. It is what it is. But how your community responds to you in those moments helps to mitigate that trauma, right? But if you want to leave as healthy as possible, you can't do it without community. And I
Mhm.
think that's part of how we have fallen flat almost, right? Because everybody's around for the baby shower, right? Everybody's around for the repast, right? But who's coming around when we need a laundry train? Who's coming around when we need meals? Who's coming around when the grieving person needs to go out and just be a person? Who comes around when the baby shower leads to no baby? Who comes around? I think that's where we as a community fail each other a lot of the times as well.
And
Yeah.
that leads me into maybe my two part. So much of what y'all are saying in terms I'm thinking of like, oh, you come here with these questions prepared and spirit's like, let's be taking it another way.
Right.
I'm curious about whose responsibility in y'all's opinions and in your work, whose responsibility is it to hold the entire community to what we need? And I say that because so much of what you're saying about, individualism and the baby shower, in the wake or the 9 nights, those are the hot times,
Mhm.
when we're talking death. It's, hopefully after people actually come, right? But do they stay is the question. Similar with birth, in the baby shower, or even when the baby is first born and people think it's the time to visit. It feels like we've really missed the cultural aspect from our, not just our spiritual traditions, excuse me, but our cultural practices around
Mhm.
decorum.
Mm.
Decorum.
Mhm.
What
Yeah,
is
no, for sure.
appropriate? What is necessary, right? And whose responsibility is it?
Mm.
And I say this coming from me being a postpartum mama that has a 14-month-old baby, right? And gets to caretake and love other people with children that I'm also like, man, colonization has done such a number that even some of the mothers who I've interacted with are so disconnected from their own bodies, right? So disconnected, doulas, disconnected from that experience that they think that, oh, you've had the baby, everything is okay. You've put that man in the ground, everything is okay. There's a disconnect around our cultural practices,
Mm.
right? And like, does it mean to grieve? What does it mean to care for someone in transition? And how do you employ grace as a necessary strategy and tactic
Mhm.
towards somebody's wellness? It feels like it's a huge, you said it, yeah. You said it, Shikemi, like we're falling flat. And that
Mhm.
flatness is not just a tool of white supremacy. It's not just an outcome of that. It's it's also internalized anti-blackness, and it's also patriarchy. It's also misogyny, right? It's also women who are so male-centered, right? Or so committed to getting their needs met, right? Their transactions, right, met, because that's how we engage. We got to talk to things if we're going to talk to things. Spiritual
Mhm.
work has become commodified.
Right.
It's become commodified. You're coming here, this is a transaction for you.
Mhm.
You don't see my humanity, right?
Yeah,
As a priest,
for
as
sure.
a coach, as a birth worker, right? Like, we got to talk to things. So if you're coming with that approach, there's already a disconnect in our cultural practice where it seems like we've been able to pick and choose around who gets humanity, who gets dignity, and how do we want to engage in care. And I'm curious about what you all have seen or maybe some recommendations around, so what kind of roles need to exist so people can get in line with their decorum to learn how to respect the dead, those that are immediately impacted by the passing, or those that are even directly impacted by the birthing.
Mm.
Because I love that you both brought that framing of like the repast and the baby shower. It's very similar vibes. We Caribbean people, similar vibes. Rum
The
pouring, drinks
party is
going,
food.
parties happening,
Yeah.
games going,
Yeah.
tears flowing. We missing somebody. You missing grandma that's not alive. Like it's all kinds of things going on. Family in town, friends in town. But
Mhm.
where are they really
Mm.
when it's over?
No, for sure. Even when my grandmother, one of the first deaths that I experienced in a very real way was my grandmother, and she was the reason why I'm even here in America now. I remember like even she died and I understood it and it was fine. And like, but my cousins, when they came from the United States, they were all here. We were in the house, we were playing, we were having a good time. I haven't seen you in forever. And it wasn't until coming back home from the cemetery and
Mm.
I'm in the limo and I'm like approaching the house and I'm like, shit, Granny's not here. And everyone has a flight in the morning. Everybody's going back to, and I was so scared. I used to sit outside the house until my mom came home from school because I didn't want to go in the house because I had to pass her room to go to my room. So like even like as an adult now, like how do I I try to make sure that like people have community, even if I'm not there, because not all the time in the same vicinity with the person, right? Sometimes they're in another state or whatever. But like when it comes to that, I'm like, you need to have someone that can manage your door
Mm.
in the sense of like the decorum part, right? Like give them space. Don't come, like let them grieve the way they need to grieve and don't say, don't sometimes it's nothing you can say, there's nothing you could do. But if you need to have somebody that can help manage that for you, like when they see people coming in or the calls, like somebody needs to help you manage that because you trying to filter through, sorry, I haven't answered all my text messages and I haven't responded to you. That should not be your responsibility when you're planning a funeral or you're grieving or, we have to do ceremony or whatever. And even that's even challenging because me trying to do a Yoruba ceremony dealing with an American situation, at the morgue or, the funeral home, that's his own thing, right? Because there's traditional things we need to do. And it's a Christian place that they might be burying this person or like, whatever. But I think people that can help manage like the very tactile things, like I don't know, it doesn't matter like gender, whatever, like whatever, but somebody needs to be there to make sure that you're safe from people coming in and filtering people because it gets very overwhelming. I remember my mom, when my grandmother died, the Monday, Thursday, she wore a dress that day to wear to the funeral. And by Thursday, the dress fell off of her. It couldn't fit her. She had lost so much weight in the
Mm.
4 or 5 days, but there was nobody there to help her because she's preparing everything. You know what I'm saying? So like seeing my own, seeing what is happening, seeing friends dying in the 90s, all these things, like you need people there to help you filter the process. Even with my Oluwo, our Oluwo, when his wife died, women were coming like Baba, I'm here for you to support you, but they just trying to fit in because now
Mhm.
he's this big chief and they just trying to fit in because the man wife is gone. Nobody was there to kind of dictate that. He's like, I'm still mourning my wife, please. Like, don't, they're coming in with niceties, but there's nobody there to help him fight that. Right. So just having somebody that can stand up for you. And it happens in birthing too, right? Like you have like somebody like an Esher Kemi to make sure that the nurses and the doctors are doing what they need to do. And this at the third is the same with death. Like people need to be there in rotation to kind of help you, go through the process. And then obviously people can't stay forever, but they're still checking in, they still coming by, they still whatever your circumstances, but you need people there for a very, very long time. Like this is a long haul thing. It's not like oh, you'll be fine in 6 months. This is a long haul thing because grieving is in so many different stages. Like I got cursed up by my mother when her brother died because she couldn't go and I'm trying to go on her behalf and she's yelling at me. So I had to realize like how to even deal with her and what grief looks like there. So everyone, you need people to be patient. You need people to be able to stand up on your behalf, to be able to speak for you at times, and to let you know that it's okay. Because sometimes you really feel bad about like just shutting out the world because you're grieving, but you have to. So I mean, it's so many layers. It's like a hard question to say what exactly. Everybody needs something else, one thing I will say, somebody at your door, somebody that is monitoring people's access to you, what people are saying to you. My aunt told me that was the reason why her mother died. Like people were saying like, because everyone's angry and grieving. So if everyone's saying different things, so it's kind of you need someone to monitor and make sure that your mental health is okay. Because they can't make you grieve better,
Right.
but they can help you with the other things that's around you. You
Hmm.
know?
I think this conversation about grief is so important because it's especially from like the birth lens, right? Because a lot of the times we're seeing the celebratory nature of birth. Um, but even in the best outcomes with birth, there's grief because you're not who you were before. Your life has changed, you have changed, your understandings of things. Literally, children wire your brain to them in
Mhm.
pregnancy. You have no choice now to be someone different, right? Um, Thinking about the earliest understandings of rewiring in pregnancy is like the concept of a fetal fracture, right? So there's a test that they do called the NIPT test, right? Where they go in and they check and make sure that there are no genetic abnormalities with the baby, but they do so through your blood. Why do they do so through your blood? Because there's something called the fetal fracture. The fetal fracture is literally the baby's DNA mixing with your own to be able to change you, right? And in that change, something in you is different, right? So there is also the grief that every birthing person experiences, birthing partners experience, and all of these different kinds of things. I think one of the ways that community is failing is through not listening actively. A lot of them, whether in birth, whether in death, everyone wants to know what you need in that moment. But if you were listening 6 months ago, you would have known what I needed. If you were listening when Granny was alive, you would have known what I needed. If you were listening during those times, then maybe I would only have to tell you one or two things. But that active listening is lost, right? We wait until the moment happens to then scramble. A lot of the times, a birthing person will tell you, okay, I'm somebody who really like requires quiet. And then if you see doctors and nurses flooding in immediately postpartum, well, then what do? You say, hey, this person requires quiet. You don't have to ask them that if you were actively listening, right? So I think we have it, the instant gratification effect has changed so much of how we handle each other, right? It's the, okay, I did this for you just now. I heard you just now. So now, okay, we're good, right? When in actuality, if you listened before, I wouldn't need to come up out my face and say something different, right? Or I wouldn't need to abandon this moment that I'm having, holding my child, holding my newborn, trying to get into the golden hour and really like hone in on what I need to do to be able to breastfeed my child in this specific hour to get my latch right and turn and say, yes, I need this thing. I believe it's the listening. I believe that we need as a community to listen to folks better and respond to their needs in the moments. And of course, needs change, but in an overwhelming way, because we're not listening to each other, because we're not fulfilling the wishes of each other in these spaces, I think that's where we're failing tremendously.
Yeah, there's so much, percolating, you know, hearing you both giving us very practical tools. Something that's really important to us at ESOC is let's not just get into the academic or so much of the spiritual that we miss the practical. The practical is necessary in conversations like this because I hear y'all offering tools. You know, Chief Erlu said, have a person who can be your intervener, essentially, your intercessory, right? Your monitor, right? Your confidant that can screen, right? Requests, screen people incoming, right? Like all of that. Then I hear Iya saying, how can you turn on your active listening skills and translate it to action? Because so much of what prepares us for this unknown in birth or death is key to listening and knowing the person and not asking them just in the moment what they need, but actually being present, right? That's embodiment, right? How can I be with you while we are alive, here now, right? As we're preparing for ushering in whatever it is that we're ushering in, be here now allows us to know what is needed, not because, oh, we're moving from a place of clairvoyance, right? Or just psychic ability. Some of us we also have that layer, but literally you can just sit with someone over a period of time and observe. That's a care ethic, paying attention to your people, right? So I hear very practical skills and tools of how we can show up for one another. And I want to continue to transition us to thinking about, whether it's a birth ritual, a ceremony, some type of artistic expression, or anything symbolic, as I'm thinking about the work that you both do. All of the work that you all are talking about organizes communities to care for one another, right? Like that's at the foundation of the work. It's care. Do you have any rituals that you believe are essential for helping Black communities thrive today? Thinking about our practice and maybe what are some basic things that people can be doing, you know, What would we do with the babies when they're born, or what could we do when the folks when they die? What are some practical things that people can be doing, in that very sacred time?
Talk to yourself nice. Big up yourself. Big up your child. Big up your partner. Talk to each other with care. Because it's not just your outer head listening to shit in a one, two, right? What you're telling yourself in the birthing experience, if you're telling yourself, I can't do this, I can't do this, I can't do that, you can't do it then. But if you can tell yourself that you can, if you can will yourself to be able to understand that what you're saying out of your mouth is also happening internally, then there's more that you can get done that way. Talking to your children a certain way, especially when they first come into the world. You are special, you are kind, you are caring, you are amazing. Everything about you is great. All of these wonderful things that you bestow upon your child when they first get here, that is who they will be.
For sure.
That is who they will be. And having people around to do the same thing, whatever your belief system is, right? Having people around who's going to say amazing things to your child, especially when they first get here, will help so, so much. Because you, especially as Black women, as Black people, we hear a lot of the times all the negative aspects of what can happen with a child and what a child can be and all of these different kinds of things. But if we're not speaking life into these kids, the world is effed up enough outside. So let's not bully ourselves and let's not bully these children.
I think for me, a lot of times we're suffering because we lost how like meaningful ways to gather,
Hmm.
to belong, to like remember. So like even like you were saying, like how do we deal with each other? And it's not that we lack the information, right? We have the information. It's just not a ritual. Because
Hmm.
with ritual is a rhythm. So now you're doing it all the time. It becomes sustainability. It starts to become a part of your person, right? It's who you, it becomes almost second nature, right? Um, so how do we gather? Share meals, have rituals, celebrate each other. And, Ifa tells us these things, right? Feed or reach the stomach, buy food and feed people, buy drinks and feed, and let people come and sit down and drink and eat with you. Because when they sit down and eat with you, they can't betray you. Feed or reach the stomach. All these things, we hear it throughout, Ifa or Mila, philosophy, right? Um, Honoring the ancestors. People might think that's a light thing. You know how many Thanksgiving food falling out of plates and all these things because I did not put food down for ancestors first? Nobody's eating, right? So even in things like that, making sure we honor our ancestors, telling them thank you. The blood in your veins is the blood from them. Say thank you, honor them. We talked about talking to babies nice, naming ceremonies,
Yep.
making sure, they go through these things because I've had people who have had to stop going by a name because the name
Hmm.
is bringing negative to them. The name is bringing death to them. So, if I was like, you can't go by this name anymore. So let's think about what we're calling our children. Let's think about what we're putting on them. You could be putting a ancestor's name on a child, and that could bring that's gonna be negative for the child.
Yep.
Just community blessings on a whole. Like we come together, we pray for each other. If somebody's going to the Navy, somebody's doing this, kids are going away to college. Like we just communing, right? Seasonal gatherings. Like I also think to an elder council is important. Who are the elders? Now we have to be careful with the elders because people that was on shit get old too. So we need to make sure that every person that's old is an elder. So we gotta
Yep.
make sure like who are these elders that we're going to? We don't, it's like we're losing grandmas and mamas and stuff. Like who's sitting down and teaching, where's Papa to tell the boy to put the girl on the inside? Like where's grandma? We losing recipes. So, like those type of things I think will be good to help with us, you know, to help us thrive. Like sometimes it's just to go back to basics. Like sometimes I just be like, what would I do if I was in Trinidad? Like I
Hmm.
remember something simple. My son had a diaper rash and I didn't know what to do. And I'm buying all this $25 set of fill and all these things and nothing, nothing, nothing. I said, hold on. Let me go get a piece of aloe plant. Man, I cut that aloe plant, I crush it up, rub it all over his booty, and in 2 days, rash what? Rash gone. You
Hmm.
understand? So sometimes just going back to basics, like think about what your grandmother did when what things you remember, things like you gotta, especially in the world we're living in right now, where we dying off of the food and we doing this and all these things, we gotta go back to like We got to get grounded in tradition. That will keep us alive, and we would thrive so much. And I see it happening in small segments, like in our community, but it's happening because we're going back to basics, you know? So yeah, we're gonna
Yeah,
be
I'm
all right.
hearing this theme. Y'all are kind of going into my next question around birth work and ancestral practices, helping us reconnect, right, with indigenous forms of knowledge. And my opinion and approach to this work is when we do that, right, we're interrupting colonization, we're interrupting white supremacy, we're interrupting institutions, right, that are harnessing their power and profiting off of our bodies. When we continue to do that. So I'm so appreciative of y'all giving the practical tools of like Sankofa, baby, go back and get it. And if there's not a place, to Eshukemi's point, that you can point in your direct lineage because of whatever separation has happened, we can also find it in community, right? You can find those recipes, right? You can start to understand when that breast is getting clogged up. Yes, I'm going to hit Eshukemi up. Oh, is it cabbage? Okay, boom. Is that what I'm doing? Is it cod liver oil? Yes, someone is passing away. We need to go do what with the ting? Okay, is the baby going to be attending? Are we putting the baby over the casket? How many times? Right? How many days does the body need to be left in the house? Right? We're talking about in the Caribbean. We die different. I shout out to Juju Bay, aka Oshunfumi Lola. She has a really important podcast episode that talks about Black people dying different, talking about hoodoo, conjure, obia, komina, mayo, ifa, right? Like she kind of goes in and talks about the importance of the how Black people die.
Mm.
And I would like to say that it transcends slavery. Sometimes we use slavery as the starting point, but that's merely just an important iteration of who we became in the diaspora.
Mm-hmm.
I'm hearing this offering that, there is a clear connection between birthwork and ancestral practice. And by doing that, like we get to participate in our freedom. Yeah. We get to participate in our liberation. We get to participate in creating something much different because they don't know, they don't have the knowledge. And when they do have the knowledge, they typically have stolen it. Right?
Mm.
So, how do we keep these conversations, these rituals within our communities, right, to preserve our communities is something that I also want to talk about, given Black maternal health disparities, reproductive injustice, medical violence, the killing of Black children, right? Like these things continue to happen and shape some of the discourse. But then you have on the other side, right, or the other, because I like to think in polar sometimes. Black people are reclaiming our traditions in a numerous ways, right? We're doing it, and we've been doing it as it relates to birth, as it relates to death, as it relates to protection. This week I had a good conversation with the Ia that's on here. Shout out to Ia Ekundayo. We did it. We're having some really beautiful conversation about everything as it relates to the protection and the preservation of Black motherhood and what those experiences have been in the context of Black people in Baltimore. Right? So we've really been getting into the things. She's a native Baltimorean. I'm a person that has relocated to Baltimore and runs a temple here. So a part of like my practice and my like commitment to Black people was to learn about the people who are from the place I reside in.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's respect, it's an exchange of like how we both are sharing land, but how your experience is informing my experience as a migrant to this place. And a part of that conversation reaffirmed this conversation I'm having with you both, because what does it mean to say that birth work is political? What does it mean to say that death work is political? We know it is. But for people that are watching this, I'm curious about, how your practices challenge these systems that historically devalue Black life, Black people, and Black ways of caring, because we just be different with how we engage with each other. Whether we're talking about folks in the South, right? For us, that's in the up South, right? Like y'all are in New York, New Jersey, I'm in Maryland. But we also are, we have a bi-coastal water theme here across the Atlantic Ocean, across the Chesapeake Bay, across the Hudson River, right? Like these waterways tell stories that are political in terms of how we care for each other. So I would love for y'all to share some wisdom and some insight around how you understand your work, your spiritual work, as political. You're muted, Dr. Mills.
I'm sorry. I remember talking to Esther Kemi had a talk about a year ago where we talked about in reproductive justice and like all these things. So she'll take care of that. But for me, it's like in the ancestral space and in dealing with death, um, I always Ifa is my base with a lot of things and what I grew up watching. So in the Caribbean, you get buried at home. You get buried in your front gallery. Some people get buried in their bedroom, wherever it is, right? Like you don't we don't have like cemeteries and in Yoruba land. I remember in Ifa saying, Arab was like, I know you guys get buried in cemeteries, but in Yoruba land, you don't really see cemeteries. You get buried on your property and your land. But like who's buying land in America really, right? Like we live in apartments, we have houses and we don't own the land that the house is on. Like, all these type of things. So me thinking about like, how do I get land so that we can do ritual the right way, put people in the ground? How do I get, you know, a mortuary that does uh Yoruba rights. Like these things are easier to get in the Caribbean, but when I think about how do we put these things in place here, and there are politicians in New York that are in the Yoruba tradition. They don't want to have these conversations. And I'm sitting here like, you want to go to lunch and brunch. I'm trying to figure out how we could get this piece of property. How can we get this going on? How can we give the bodies the dignity that they deserve and the rituals that need to happen to move this type of thing forward. So like for me, it's political in that way. Um, you know, it's very layered for me. It's very complicated. It's tied up in so much red tape. But for me, it's like push it, keep doing it. I've had people that have passed and they want to do the rituals, but they can't because of how the morgue is set up and how this is set up, and they can't get the body and they can't this and they can't this. So many things that we can't do, but working on actively thinking about what rules have to change. Do we just move like underground? Like often I'm just like, we could just go rogue and I could just do this thing and nobody, and hope if I could just protect us, like we just go invisible. But it's so much, politics and death that we don't really think about. And then lineage and like ancestry. And when you think about properties, and even if you're thinking about like wills and all these things and how you're buried and like, economics, right? Because a lot of times the body rain can't fall directly on the spot, right? So you might need to build a mausoleum. Dumb shits is the price of a house, right? Like there are thousands and thousands. It's like buying even a spot in a cemetery is super expensive. So like, what do we do economics? How do we get this person in the ground? How do we do it in time? It's so complex. And I was like, it's very hard being non practicing a non-Western tradition in the West, because it's so many like walls that we have to go through and so many things we have to fight, and we don't have the backing. So I'm hoping that the ICIR, we will be working towards those things so that we can do it as close as possible. We won't be able to do it exactly as they're doing it in Yoruba land, but even if we're getting close, we're still opening it up so we could get things done the right way, because there's so many processes. And I always watch the Jews. I watch them very closely. I'm like, well, if the Jews could do it, we can do it. So I've been paying attention to like how they're getting away with things and trying to see if we could implement that for ourselves, especially when it comes to the business of dying, and how we bury our dead and the dignity that we need, and also teaching people how to, cremation isn't really something that's looked at as necessarily a good thing in Ifa. So, we want to keep the body whole, like just also educating people too, and just making sure that they're making the right decisions for themselves and their families in these times.
I, I wanna just jump on that point of watching the Jews. No, because yes, they have hospitals. Like they're understandings even of birth practices, like circumcision is a Jewish tradition, but everybody gets a form that asks you if you want to
Right.
circumcise, right? That's their tradition, right? They are allowed to birth in a certain way. They are allowed to have certain understandings of their spirituality put in place inside of these policies, right? So that they can have what they need during the birthing process as well, right? I remember when I was giving birth to my daughter, and um I was asked if there's any, because my OB was a Vincentian woman, bless her heart. But she was like, is there any cultural thing you want to do? Da da da. You know, the Muslims, they say a prayer in the baby's ear, they do this, they do that, all these different kinds of things. But for our traditions, because there's a lack of being outside, if that's the best way to put it, right? We're not as outside as Judaism or Christianity or Islam, right? There's a lack of us being outside and being allowed to be outside in certain ways, right? Um, our practices in birth and even in death don't get the political nuance that is necessary for them to be baked into hospital policy, right? I also think about understanding the history of Black birth in this country, right? So I've recently done a lot of work with the Birth Justice Institute, funded and founded by Ancient Song. They're super dope. Look them up, all that kind of stuff. And in my fellowship, we've talked a lot about um, the birth justice timeline and realizing how certain political events have and timeline events have interrupted what birthing practices look like for us, whether you're from the Caribbean, whether you're someone who has a bunch of lineage in the United States, and so on and so forth. And one of the things that I think about a lot is mass incarceration and its interruption of the Black family and the Black birthing process. I think a lot about the grand midwives. Some people call them the granny midwives, but we don't do that around here. The grand midwives who literally held these practices in their bosoms to make sure that everyone could have a respectable birthing experience. And I say respectable because coming out alive is the bare minimum, right? Is the bare minimum. And that is what a lot of us are fighting to waiting for at this point. That is the bare minimum here, right? When thinking about a respectable birth experience, meaning that you as the person who is birthing is given the autonomy of choice, right? When you have hospitals where they're saying, oh no, we don't work with doulas. Why not? Why not? Because you don't want folks to have the autonomy of choice. You don't want them to understand that you're not actually giving them informed consent, that you're just saying things to them in medical jargon that they can't understand or comprehend. You're making them sign things in duress. One of the most political things to me is asking someone if they would like to have their membrane swept, and I'll explain what that is in a second. Asking someone if they would like to have their membrane swept while your hand is in their vagina. I think that that is one of the most political moves that you can make as a clinician and as a practitioner. And a membrane sweep is essentially when um, someone goes in and separates the oh gosh, the sac, the amniotic sac from the uterus to be able to try to like bring the baby on before it's time. Because sometimes they're like, let's speed this up, etc. A lot of times they're like, let's speed this up, etc., etc. But being asked to make that decision while you're checking me cervically is one of the most political things that you could do. And the fact that that is not seen as medical abuse, that it's not seen as malpractice, that it is seen as normal for clinicians is a reintroduction of the patriarchy into a space that should be safe for us. So that's what I mean when I say things like respectable birthing experience.
You're literally talking, and I'm like, they literally say it's a standard practice. How sway? But
I
of
mean, I've been in
course,
situations, sorry, where I had to, where, so me and Esther County work together. You mentioned that we worked together before, right? So we work in different ways. So I might get a client that's pregnant. Esther County jumps on board, like, all right, girl, because I'm not hands-on, I'm not a doula. I do the spiritual work behind the scenes. You're in the hospitals with them. So we work together in that way. And it's been so many times when like it's labor and she's calling me like, Chief, the day this, day that, and I'm just like, okay, cool. We're divining, we're doing different things, but it gets so nasty in there.
Mm-hmm.
You'll wait until she'll like step out and the nurse will run in and try to give the person magnesium. And it's like so many little, just like thinking about the politics of the hospital. And even though you might have a black nurse, she's still trained under this white supremacist
Absolutely.
hospital system. So they're still doing the same things even though they're black. If you're lucky to get an old Jamaican lady or an old Haitian lady or old somebody who might bring in a little Spanish lady, somebody to bring in something else. But honestly, it is like so embedded in the system, like all skin folk and kinfolk. So I do hope politically that even like I feel like there should be Eshukemis in every room with a mother to speak up for her, to even speak up for the dads, because sometimes the dads can't even speak up for their wives and their girlfriends and whoever that's in the space. And it's all in policy. So I'm just hoping that maybe that could be something that maybe insurance. I'm like, as you can do you take insurance? Because I feel like people would probably have more like doulas and stuff if they could afford it,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because that's like, not everyone has like disposable income, especially when you're bringing a baby in, you're counting your coins, even if you have it. You know what I mean? So it's like, how can we make this where it's like almost mandatory, or it's the option in law that a person can medically get a representative in there with them or somebody to speak on their behalf. Because like you said, I remember going to the hospital in pain and my mother's cussing, big Trinidadian woman cussing at the nurse and them. She was like, get her in the hospital. There's like, well, I need her to sign this. And I'm like leaned over in like contractions. Egg Cool is about to come out now. And they want me to sign paperwork
That is
and
the rest. That is the
stand in the
rest.
lobby. My mother's carrying on, but these are the things that is normal, right? So like,
Mhm.
how do we get policy around those type of things? It's insane.
Yep. And if you think about it in any other situation other than birth, like you cannot sign or consent to anything under duress. Like this is the most distressing situation possible. Somebody is trying to come out of your body. How in the world are you making rational decisions? And they count on that, right? Which is the part that is political, right? They know this. They clinically understand what's going on in your body. So they know that even if you're breathing a certain way, folks who understand the world of birth understand if you're hearing a then you know this person not here no more. You know they don't got no mental faculty no more. They are involved in what's happening. Don't ask me to sign nothing now. Are you crazy? But that's the politic.
Even in death, you have
Hmm.
to sign paperwork. You're with the coroner. You're trying to do the right thing. You're thinking about money, especially if it was an unexpected death. And burials are expensive in the United States, right? So, you know, it's like they do it when they know.
Hmm.
And if you're the sole person that's there, you're in distress, you're not making the right decisions. So all you can do is pray that you find somebody that's a decent human that will support you through the process. Because other than that, they don't care. They really don't. And they don't respect, I think they respect death less than birth. Like I think in the United States, they don't even have an understanding of death, right? It's like you don't talk about the dead, you put them in the ground and that's it. Like,
Hmm.
it's so they don't have the same respect for it. They have fear for it, but not, in the same way. So I don't even think that the policies and things around burial and death and ritual, you know, you have to almost do it individually. The Muslims know what to do, the Jews know what to do, everybody kind of knows what to do. So like we'll have to figure that out. And I always think about something that Fabumi always said. She said in a meeting one time, you're like, we need to be kind to ourselves because we're still figuring this out. Because
Mm.
sometimes I feel like, damn, we should have been moving further. Like, why don't we have like burial places, and why don't we have like, places to do the rituals here and there? And I'm like, okay, well, we just started this. So calm down, girl. We'll get there. We're working on it. But it's frustrating because people die every day. It's not stopping. So we need to get it done.
yeah, thank you both. You're bringing up so many so many things, right, that is really thematically talking about the politics of life and death, right? The politics of life. That's what this conversation is about. What does it mean when violence is embedded systemically into the practices and policies of life and death? We know what that means, right? We've experienced that. We are continuing to experience it. And I'm hearing an invitation, right, to the people that are present on this call and the people that will watch this later, right? Whether it's a YouTube, an Instagram, whatever you, or however you reach us in terms of this medium. But I want to take us as we close into reimagining a different future, you know, as we reimagine a more just and life affirming, right, and soul affirming and dignified, right, like life, and also continuum and honoring for birth workers and ancestral practitioners and deaf doulas and caretakers. You know, you're reminding us that care is the center of our morale, the center of the ethos of the work that we're moving. Whether we are priestess in the Ifa and Orisha tradition in the diaspora, or whether we're a doula or an artist, care is central, right, to not just spirituality, but these politics of life. And as we close, I'm curious about what y'all want to offer the future, right? Like, how do we want to reimagine this world that we know is necessary yesterday, right? That we're building today, right? And tomorrow. And maybe you can share one piece of wisdom with us, right, on what you hope that we will carry forward as you leave this conversation. You know, we've talked about so many things: the birthing process, ancestral rights and responsibilities, naming ceremonies, you know, how other communities, like folks of Jewish descent, how they're building institutions, right? And how we need to be doing the same and honoring our indigenous practices, right, in the same ways. Someone may watch this and say, how the hell do I start that? You know, someone may watch this and say, well, I'm just so and so. I can't do that by myself. I want people to watch this and know that there is something that you can do, right? To contribute and to reimagine this different future where Black birthing, right, and Black death is not only tended to, but honored and revered and supported. That it starts simply with one person, with you. Yeah. So what's that? What's the wisdom you have for us as we close and take questions and comments and get into some dialogue with participants?
So on the grief spectrum and the death spectrum, I would like if we can, as a community, share it instead of hiding it, right? I was watching a meme, I was watching a TikTok, and they were showing how the Ghanaians made caskets for those that descended based on like what their thing was. So people are in sneakers, fishing boats, all these type of, I'm like, this is so insane. So like my artistic side is like, oh, this is a vibe. And then just thinking about how they're honoring this person and like who they were in life and, you know, celebrating them in that way. And it's not hidden. And like just thinking about how we would, you know, we'll all be ancestors at one point, right? Just thinking about every decision that you make right now, you're going to leave somebody behind. You know, that you want to make sure that in this time while you're here, that we're honoring those that stood before us, prayed for us, sacrificed for us, dreamed of us. Because that's, you know, every step that we make right now will affect those that we'll leave behind.
Mm-hmm.
You want to be the, you know, you want people to call on you. You want people to bury you correctly. You want them to honor your tradition. You want them to, you know, my mother had to fight to bury my grandmother's spiritual Baptist because her Christian sisters want to put in the church. She's like, no, we will have drumming and we will cross this child over 3 times and we will do the things, honor them. The way they lived, bury them that way, right? Remember where you come from. Remember your people, right? Don't forget, like, pray for those who came before you and those that are coming. There's a saying that our grandparents' prayers are still carrying us today, right? So I would just say, in grief, like, let us not look at death as the end. It is not final. It is a transition. It is a new space. Now we just have to listen to them differently, experience them differently. But they're still here, right? And you just honor them, the positive ones, call them the positive ones, right? But just, because they're protecting us, they prayed for us, they want us to carry things further. So, let's just continue to be and do the right thing every day and be worthy ancestors when it's our time as well. Because it's coming.
Yeah.
That's one thing you can't run from.
Yep.
It's a little morbid, but it's the truth.
I think two things. Similarly to what you were just saying about, it's coming for us all, right? But also the amount of children that we have seen be ancestors, the amount of children who have returned, right? So think about that when dealing with people as well, right? How you dealt with them in life, they will come back. They will come back. Don't let it be your ass. That's one. Two, that practicing active listening to your people. Listen to the pregnant people in your life. Listen to the birthing people in your life. Listen to the people with uteruses. We know what we're talking about our own bodies. We know. Actively listen. And if you are in a position of power, right? Use that power to be able to amplify those voices, right? Because a lot of the times what we're saying is falling on deaf ear. So utilize what we're saying and take it elsewhere and big us up.
Thank you both for, I think, a beautiful, challenging, nuance filled conversation in a real, raw, authentic way, right? Informed and undergirded by your Caribbean practices, traditions, and I think just your own personhood. There's a way that we enter conversations based on where we sit in the continuums. And I really appreciate you both bringing your personal experiences, right, in a safe way that's accessible for everyone to move away from this conversation with new knowledge, right, with confirmation, if you will, and even next steps on how to be, right? Whether you are a birthing person, whether you have been a birthing person, or whether you love a birthing person. And we all know the other polar opposite of that is we all are going to be ancestors, like Dr. Mills said. So what do you want to do with that dash? That's something my husband says when he's praying, when he's about to do IFA consultation. He's like, Orimilai, we know that we can change a lot of different things, but we cannot change, right, what's after that dash. So give us the insight and the recipe and the Odu, etc., right, that will give us insight on how to live, right, with the in between. So I really think of this conversation as the beginning of many on how we talk about the in between, right? And the in between is what we're doing right now, y'all, right? Of like how we can shift and reimagine a different future. So thank you both. I know someone had a question and they actually DM'd me, but then they had to leave. So we're just wondering if anyone has any questions directly for the panelists, or any comments before we head out for the evening. Thank you all so much for attending and staying with us. And thank you for your contributions in the chat as well.
Hello, good night. Aboru aboye aboshishe for those who practice. I just want to say that this was so like dense and like just and nourishing in like the best ways possible. Like I'm like here trying to like scribble things down, but I'm like, wait, this is gonna be recorded, it's gonna be there. And I already know that I'm gonna watch this more than once. Like there was so much in this conversation. I'm just really, really grateful. I'm just so grateful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, you from Miami. They were actually featured on the first Roundtable series just a few weeks ago. Thank you. Well, we won't hold you. We want to give you back some of your time on this Wednesday. We thank you. Look out for our next Reimagining Spirituality conversation. It's actually going to be in person in September. We're hosting a Florida Water Ancestral Technology workshop with a good friend, another Baltimorean, Iya Oyafumilayo. It's going to be an in-person event where we're going to talk about the importance of bringing in our ancestral practices in our everyday life and what are the historical origins for protection. So that will be one of our first in-person events of this year. And next month, we're going to be featuring some of the work of our alumni cohort. We've been running a cohort every year since 2020, and it used to just be for college students and student leaders who are organizing, but we expanded in 2023 to include community members because we're at college campuses in communities, right? So how do we have conversations around organizing and spirituality? We're going to be launching another one next year, but we brought some of our alumni who are working on some really important projects, and we're going to be sharing their work with the public as we start to design our first zine as a collective. So if you all are interested and you are a part of our newsletter and you follow us on Instagram, it's Envision Safety DC_Maryland, and we're gonna share those details in the next 7 to 10 days. But we're really grateful for your time. We like having easy, accessible conversations that help us build power in both our communities, right, on college campuses and spiritual temples and workplaces, etc. And we hope that you're moving away from this conversation with some knowledge or some confirmation about how you want to show up when we start having the conversations about the politics of life and death. Thank y'all so much. Be well.